let's talk about how to practice drawing safely. But first, let's review our rules of firearm safety. So 1 is safe gun. Treat all firearms as if they're loaded, but also know the condition of your firearm at all times. 2, safe direction. Always keep the muzzle of your firearm pointed in a safe direction, so just in case if it is fired, nothing's gonna be damaged and nobody's gonna be injured. 3 is safe finger. We always wanna keep our finger high on the frame of the gun unless we're in the process of firing. 4 is our safe target and target line, and then 5 is our safe storage. Before we get started with our practice, we wanna make sure that our firearm is 100% unloaded. You need to double and triple check. And then take any ammunition that may be in the room and completely remove it from the area, preferably put it in a different room. If you are practicing this at the range, first check with the range staff to confirm with them that it is okay that you draw from holster. If you are practicing at home, make sure that you do have a safe area with a safe backstop. So I like to teach a 3-step draw process. It just keeps things simple and concise. Step 1 in our draw process, we have to clear our clothing out of the way so that we can get to our firearm. Now, when you grab your clothing, you want to grab your clothing the closest to where your firearm's located. Since I'm carrying appendix, I'm going to grab right here in front. But if you are carrying 3 or 4 o'clock, you want to grab and reach for your 3 or 4 o'clock position. So our step 1, I'm gonna grab and crush grip with my support hand. I prefer to grab the middle of my clothing because I found it's worked out with a wider variety of clothing options. But I'm gonna grab and crush grip, rip my clothing out of the way, and now I'm going to establish my grip on my gun. When I establish my grip on my gun, I wanna have the same grip I would need if I was actually shooting. So I wanna make sure there's no space under my beaver tail and no space under my trigger guard when I wrap my fingers around. And notice where my trigger finger is at. When I pull my gun out of my holster, it's already high on my frame where it needs to be. So again, step 1, I'm gonna grab and crush grip, rip my clothing out of the way, and establish my grip on my gun. And ideally, both my hands will be working at the same time when I do my step 1. And when you're practicing your draw process, you can practice each step as its own section. So I like to do a few 1 repetitions before I move on and do my step 2s and 3s. Now for step 2 of my draw process. I've got my clothing cleared out of the way and I've got a good grip on my gun. Now I'm gonna be bringing my gun out of my holster. When I do that, I'm gonna bring my gun up and immediately drop my elbow. Notice how when I drop my elbow, my muzzle is now oriented forward. Okay, and it's a quick transition to start adding my support hand to my gun. When I add my support hand, I'm just gonna kind of hit this quick reverse karate chop right here under my trigger guard where I have no space under my trigger guard as well. From right here, if I want to, I can try and fully build my grip, or I can leave my support hand kind of open. But what's important is that I am here in this compressed ready position with my good solid grip on my firearm. If you have a manual safety on your firearm, this is the point where you'd want to deactivate that manual safety mechanism. Now for step 3 of my draw process. I want to make sure that I fully establish my grip on my gun while I extend and lift onto my target. So I'm fully establishing my grip on my gun while I extend and lift onto my target. And if I'm coming on target and I've made the decision to fire, it's okay to start transitioning my finger to my trigger as well in my step 3. Now that I've ended on my step 3, I'm gonna reset. When I reset, I wanna make sure that my finger is off my trigger first, and then I'm just gonna follow my steps backwards. So I'm gonna come straight back to my 2 position. If I have a safety, I'm gonna reactivate that safety. Then I'm gonna clear my clothing out of the way, and I'm gonna look my firearm back into my holster. When I'm putting my gun back into my holster, it's important that I look and actually see that opening. When I'm looking, I can see if there's any clothing or anything that could be obstructing my holster. And then when I put my gun back in my holster, notice how my trigger finger comes up off my firearm. When I'm putting my gun back into my holster, there's no reason as to why my trigger finger even needs to be on my firearm at all. And then when my muzzle goes back into my holster, notice how I'm not digging or muzzling or flagging myself when I do so. And I'm going to slide it back in and hear it click into place. There's no reason as to why you need to jam your firearm back into your holster quickly. And again, your trigger finger should be completely away from your trigger. So again, we're gonna walk all the way through steps 1, 2, and 3. So my step one, I've got my grab and crush grip, rip my clothing out of the way, and establish my grip on my gun. So my 1 count. My 2, I'm gonna bring my gun up out of my holster and immediately drop my elbow. When I drop it again, my muzzle's oriented forward and I can establish my grip with my support hand. I can hit that reverse karate chop. For my 3, I'm gonna fully grip my gun as I present and lift onto my target. And again, if I've made the decision to fire, I can start moving my finger to my trigger as well. Then when I reset, I'm gonna make sure that my finger goes straight on the frame, and I'm gonna do my same steps, but in reverse. I'm gonna come back to my 2, I'm gonna clear my clothing out of the way, and I'm going to look my gun into my holster. And again, each step can be practiced as its own section. So if I wanna do a few repetitions of my 1 count, I can do that. If I wanna do a few repetitions of just my 2, I can do that as well. Same with 3.